This is the Quotations of Chairman Mao Zedong, also known as the Little Red Book. Chapter 6. Imperialism and all reactionaries are paper tigers. All reactionaries are paper tigers. In appearance, the reactionaries are terrifying, but in reality, they are not so powerful. From a long-term point of view, it is not the reactionaries, but the people who are really powerful. Quotation from Talks with the American correspondent Anna Louise Strong, August 1946, Selected Works, Volume 4, page 100. Just as there is not a single thing in the world without a dual nature, this is the law of the unity of opposites. So imperialism and all reactionaries have a dual nature. They are real tigers and paper tigers at the same time. In past history, before they won state power, and for some time afterwards, the slave-owning class, the feudal landlord class, and the bourgeoisie were vigorous, revolutionary, and progressive. They were real tigers. But with the lapse of time, because their opposites, the slave class, the peasant class, and the proletariat, grew in strength step by step, struggled against them more and more fiercely, these ruling classes changed step by step into the reverse, changed into reactionaries, changed into backwards people, changed into paper tigers. And eventually, they were overthrown, or will be overthrown, by the people. The reactionary, backward, decaying classes retained this dual nature even in their last life-and-death struggles against the people. On the other hand, they were real tigers. They devoured people by the millions and tens of millions. The cause of the people's struggle went through a period of difficulties and hardships, and along the path there were many twists and turns. To destroy the rule of imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism in China took the Chinese people more than 100 years and cost them tens of millions of lives before the victory in 1949. Look, were these not living tigers, iron tigers, real tigers? But in the end, they changed into paper tigers, dead tigers, bean-curd tigers. These are historical facts. Have people not seen or heard about these facts? There have indeed been thousands and tens of thousands of them. Thousands and tens of thousands. Hence, imperialism and all reactionaries, looked at in essence from a long-term point of view, from a strategic point of view, must be seen for what they are, paper tigers. On this we should build our strategic thinking. On the other hand, they are also living tigers, iron tigers, real tigers which can devour people. On this we should build our tactical thinking. Quotations from a speech at the Wuchang meeting of the Political Bureau of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, December 1st, 1958, quoted in the explanatory note to, quote, Talk with the American correspondent Anna Louise Strong, end quote, Selected Works, Volume 4, page 98 and 99. I have said that all of the reputedly powerful reactionaries are merely paper tigers. The reason is that they are divorced from the people. Look, was not Hitler a paper tiger? Was Hitler not overthrown? I also said that the Tsar of Russia, the Emperor of China, and Japanese imperialism were all paper tigers. As we know, they were all overthrown. The United States and her imperialism have not yet been overthrown, and it has the atom bomb. I believe it also will be overthrown. It too is a paper tiger. From a speech at the Moscow meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties, November 18th, 1957. Lifting a rock only to drop it on one's own feet is a Chinese folk saying to describe the behavior of certain fools. The reactionaries in all countries are fools of this kind. In the final analysis, their persecution of the revolutionary people only serves to accelerate the people's revolutions on a broader and more intense scale. Did not the persecution of the revolutionary people by the Tsar of Russia and by Chiang Kai-shek perform this function in the great Russian and Chinese revolutions? Quotations from a speech at the meeting of the Supreme Soviet of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, in celebration of the 40th anniversary of the Great October Socialist Revolution, November 6, 1957. U.S. imperialism invaded China's territory of Taiwan and has occupied it for the past 9 years. A short while ago, it sent its armed forces to invade and occupy Lebanon. The United States has set up hundreds of military bases in many countries all over the world. China's territory of Taiwan, Lebanon, and all military bases of the United States on foreign soil are so many nooses round the neck of U.S. imperialism. The nooses have been fashioned by the Americans themselves and by no one else. And it is they themselves who have put these nooses round their own necks, handing the ends of the ropes to the Chinese people, the peoples of the Arab countries, and all the peoples of the world who love peace and oppose aggression. The longer the United States aggressors remain in those places, the tighter the noose round their necks will become. From a speech at the Supreme State Conference, September 8, 1958. Imperialism will not last long, because it always does evil things. It persists in grooming and supporting reactionaries in all countries who are against the people. It has forcibly seized many colonies and semi-colonies, and many military bases, and it threatens the peace with atomic war. Thus, forced by imperialism to do so, more than 90% of the peoples of the world are rising or will rise up in struggle against it. Yet imperialism is still alive and well, still running amok in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. In the West, imperialism is still oppressing the people at home. This situation must change. It is the task of the people of the whole world to put an end to the aggression and oppression perpetuated by imperialism, and chiefly by U.S. imperialism. From an interview with a Xinhua, I believe that should be pronounced Xinhua, they've spelt it wrong, interview with a Xinhua news agency correspondent, September 29, 1958. Riding roughshod everywhere, the United States and her imperialism has made itself the enemy of the peoples of the world and has increasingly isolated itself. Those who refuse to be enslaved will never be cowed by the atom bombs and hydrogen bombs in the hands of the U.S. imperialists. The raging tide of the people of the world against the United States and aggressors is irresistible. Their struggle against U.S. imperialism and its lackeys will assuredly win still greater victories. Quotation from a statement supporting the Panamanian people's just patriotic struggle against U.S. imperialism. January 12, 1964. Peoples of the world unite and defeat the U.S. aggressors and all their lackeys. And ed. pp. 9-10. Just before I continue here, I would assume that that was around the time that the U.S. invaded and occupied Panama in order to complete the Panama Canal, which bisects the Americas, north and south. It's a massive trade route in the current day. That's very, very important to international shipping. Originally, the canal was being constructed by the French using slave labor. Due to diseases and other factors in the region, that effort failed, and the task fell to the Americans, who seized the canal zone as a military base for a good many years, completed the construction of the project, and basically maintained it for a good many years, having a base there. As I understand it, in the years since, this being 2018, the Panamanians now have control over those sea lanes independent of the Americans, at least in theory. Now, continuing. If the U.S. monopoly capitalist groups persist in pushing their policies of aggression and war, the day is bound to come when they will be hanged by the people of the whole world. The same fate awaits the accomplices of the United States. From a speech at the Supreme State Conference, September 8, 1958. Over a long period, we have developed this concept for the struggle against the enemy. Strategically, we should despise all of our enemies, but tactically, we should take them all seriously. This also means that we must despise the enemy with respect to the whole, but that we must take him seriously with respect to each and every concrete question. If we do not despise the enemy with respect to the whole, we shall be committing an error of opportunism. Marx and Engels were only two individuals, and yet in those early days they already declared that capitalism would be overthrown throughout the world. But in dealing with concrete problems and particular enemies, we shall be committing the error of adventurism unless we take them all seriously. In war, battles can only be fought one by one, and the enemy forces can only be destroyed one by one. Factories can only be built one by one. The peasants can only plow the land plot by plot. The same is even true of eating a meal. Strategically, we take the eating of a meal lightly. We know we can finish it. But actually, we eat it mouthful by mouthful. It is impossible to swallow an entire banquet in one gulp. This is known as a piecemeal solution. In military parlance, it is called wiping out the enemy forces one by one. Quotations from a speech at the Moscow meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties, November 18, 1957. It is my opinion that the international situation has now reached a new turning point. There are two winds in the world today, the east wind and the west wind. There is a Chinese saying, either the east wind prevails over the west wind, or the west wind prevails over the east wind. I believe it is characteristic of the situation today that the east wind is prevailing over the west wind. That is to say, the forces of socialism have become overwhelmingly superior to the forces of imperialism, IBID. Which is to say, this too came from a speech at the Moscow meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties circa November 18, 1957. Pardon me. This concludes Chapter 6. Chapter 7, Dare to Struggle and Dare to Win, will be included in the following video of this series. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.